Eala and Venus Williams have not played a single official point in Washington yet, but they are already changing the conversation around the entire tournament. Their first practice session together drew more than 50,000 views in roughly 5 hours as fans watched a 21-year-old rising star exchange ideas with a 46-year-old tennis legend. What was supposed to be a doubles partnership has quickly become one of the biggest stories at the Mubadala DC Open. So why is this unlikely pairing generating more excitement than many of the tournament's singles matchups? The answer begins with what people saw on the practice court. When Eala and Venus stepped onto the hard court together in Washington, the moment did not feel like a staged appearance created for a few photographs. They were talking, listening, laughing, and preparing with the focus of two players who expected their partnership to matter once the tournament began. They also joined a hitting session against male players, adding greater pace and intensity to a practice that already had more eyes on it than most early-round doubles matches ever receive. Yet the tennis itself was only one reason the video spread so quickly. The image carried an immediate emotional weight. On one side stood Venus Williams, a player whose career is connected to some of the most important chapters in modern American tennis. On the other stood Eala, a young Filipino star whose rise has begun to change what an entire country believes is possible in the sport. They were separated by 25 years, entirely different career journeys, and two fan bases that came to the moment with very different memories. But on that court, none of those differences created distance. They created curiosity. For longtime followers of Venus, the practice session offered another chance to see a familiar champion competing with purpose, instead of simply appearing as a ceremonial figure from the past. For Eala's supporters, it was something even more personal. A Filipino player was not standing outside the spotlight or waiting for an invitation into the conversation. She was sharing the court with one of the most recognizable athletes tennis has ever produced. That contrast is what made the clip hit differently. Women's doubles usually has to fight for attention during the opening days of a tour event. Single stars dominate the promotional posters, television discussions, ticket campaigns, and headlines. Doubles often become something fans discover after they arrive at the grounds, not the reason they decide to come in the first place. Washington was beginning to feel different before the draw had even been completed. The tournament's official channels were pushing the Eala and Venus partnership aggressively. Fans were following practice updates, replaying short exchanges between them, and searching for information about when they might appear. The conversation was no longer limited to whether Venus could produce another memorable return or whether Eala could continue her rise. The larger question became what might happen when those two stories were placed on the same side of the net. This was not a completely manufactured pairing either. Eala and Venus had already competed together at Bad Homburg, where they won their opening match and advanced to the quarterfinals. That result did not turn them into an established championship team, but it gave Washington something important to build on. They had already shared the feeling of winning together. Their reunion now carried continuity, rather than the emptiness of a one-night exhibition. That history also helped explain why their first Washington practice attracted so much attention. Fans were not simply watching two famous names meet for the first time. They were watching the next chapter of a partnership that had shown enough promise to make people wonder what it could become. And around the courts, the reaction appeared to be moving beyond online excitement. Supporters came hoping to see Eala up close, while generations of American fans still responded to Venus with the kind of recognition few athletes ever maintain for so long. The combination created an atmosphere that felt unusually large for a doubles practice. It was part sporting preparation, part cultural moment, and part reminder that tennis can bring together audiences that might otherwise follow completely different stories. That is why this partnership has become so valuable to Washington. Venus brings history that American fans already understand. Eala brings the excitement of a future that still feels open and unpredictable. One player reminds people why they fell in love with tennis. The other gives them a new reason to keep watching. Their impact is not coming from age alone, and it is not coming only from celebrity. It is coming from the way each woman changes how the audience sees the other. Venus makes Eala's arrival feel bigger. Eala makes Venus's return feel less like a trip through memory and more like a step toward whatever comes next. The attention has already arrived. The views, the fan reaction, and the tournament's promotional energy have made that clear. The real question now is why these two players, whose careers could hardly look more different, appear to become more important when they stand together than when either one stands alone. That question leads directly to the real power of this partnership, because Eala and Venus are not simply bringing two famous names into the same photograph. They are bringing together two different meanings of tennis fame. Venus represents recognition that has been built over decades. Her career is part of the shared memory of American sports, extending beyond people who watch every tournament or follow every ranking change. Her name carries championships, cultural influence, resilience, and the feeling of having witnessed an athlete reshape what was possible for those who came after her. Eala represents a very different kind of attention. Her story is still moving upward, which means every major appearance feels like another boundary being crossed. Filipino fans are not looking at a finished legacy. They are watching one being created in real time, with all the excitement and uncertainty that come with it. When those two energies meet, they do more than coexist. They strengthen each other. For American fans who may not yet know every detail of Eala's journey, Venus becomes a bridge. Seeing Eala beside a champion of that stature naturally raises questions. Why did this partnership happen? What has the younger player shown? Why are so many supporters reacting as if this is much bigger than a normal doubles entry? Those questions draw people toward Eala without reducing her to someone who needs a famous name for legitimacy. Her results and growing presence have already earned attention. Venus simply places that rise in front of an audience that may otherwise have taken longer to notice it. The effect works in reverse as well. Every Venus appearance now carries an unavoidable conversation about age, longevity, and the distance between the player she once was and the player she is today. That conversation is understandable, but it can become repetitive. It can turn every return into a comparison with the past, leaving little room to appreciate what the present moment actually means. Eala changes that frame. Beside her, Venus is not only a legend trying to extend an extraordinary career. She becomes part of a story about connection, exchange, and the future of the sport. The attention moves away from a simple question about what Venus has left and toward a more interesting one. What can her presence create when it is linked to a player whose biggest chapters may still be ahead? That shift matters because nostalgia alone rarely sustains interest for long. People may tune in once to see a familiar face, but they stay when the story begins producing something new. Eala gives the Venus narrative that forward motion. There is also a cultural force behind the reaction in Washington that cannot be separated from the tennis. The wider Washington region, including communities across Maryland and Virginia, is home to a significant Filipino population. For those supporters, Eala's appearance is not simply another opportunity to cheer for a player who happens to share their background. Her rise carries the feeling of national representation on a stage where Filipino tennis has rarely occupied the center. That helps explain why a practice video could generate such a rapid response. Fans were not only interested in whether Eala and Venus looked comfortable together. They were reacting to what the image represented. A young Filipino athlete stood beside an American icon as a competitive partner. She was not being introduced as a novelty. She was not appearing in a ceremonial role. She belonged in the same frame because her own career had brought her there. For a community that has followed her progress closely, that distinction is enormous. It also gives the tournament something few promotional campaigns can manufacture: genuine emotional investment. Fans do not need to be told why the moment matters. They already feel it. They share clips, organize around schedules, arrive at the grounds, and bring relatives or friends who may not normally follow women's doubles. That kind of attention is extremely valuable for Washington, especially during a week when several recognizable players had withdrawn from the women's field. The singles draw still had major names, established contenders, and plenty of competitive interest. But tournament promotion is not built only on rankings. It is built on stories that make people care before the first ball is struck. Eala and Venus gave Washington one of those stories. Their partnership allowed the tournament to reach several audiences at once. There were longtime Venus supporters, Filipino fans following Eala's rise, casual viewers intrigued by the age difference, and dedicated tennis followers curious to see whether the chemistry from Bad Homburg could carry into another event. Very few doubles teams can create that many entry points into the same match. This is why the partnership began challenging the usual hierarchy between singles and doubles. It was not because doubles had suddenly become more important across the entire tournament. It was because one doubles team had become unusually easy to promote, discuss, and emotionally understand. The story could be expressed in a single image: the legend and the rising star standing together. Yet, beneath that simple image were several deeper layers. It connected the past to the future. It linked American tennis history with Filipino sporting ambition. It offered Venus a story beyond nostalgia, and Eala a larger introduction to the American public. It gave the tournament a powerful piece of content at a moment when organizers needed every compelling storyline available. The reaction around their practice session showed how quickly that value could move from theory into reality. The official clip collected more than 50,000 views in roughly 5 hours. Thousands of interactions followed. Fans began treating a practice session as if it were a major tournament event, studying every exchange and waiting for the next update. That level of interest is not created by a doubles entry alone. It comes from the emotional meaning attached to the people involved. For broadcasters and digital platforms, the appeal is obvious. Venus has a large American following built across generations. Eala brings an intensely engaged Filipino audience that can expand a tournament's reach far beyond the local market. Together, they offer a storyline capable of traveling across time zones, cultures, and different levels of tennis knowledge. A casual viewer does not need to understand every detail of doubles strategy to understand why the pairing matters. The contrast is visible immediately, and the emotional logic is easy to follow. But the partnership avoids becoming a shallow marketing exercise because both women have something real to gain. For Venus, Washington offers another chance to compete at home while presenting her career through a fresh relationship, rather than another tribute to everything she accomplished years ago. She can still influence the attention around an event, but now that influence is helping create space for another player as well. For Eala, standing beside Venus offers more than exposure. It gives her direct experience of what it feels like to carry a major American crowd, face constant media attention, and enter a match that people view as an event rather than a routine appearance. That experience could become important as Eala moves deeper into the North American hardcourt season and toward the US Open. The attention surrounding her is no longer limited to Filipino tennis circles. Expectations are widening, and Washington offers a chance to grow into that larger visibility without standing there alone. The most important point, however, is that neither woman disappears inside the other person's story. Venus is not being presented merely as Eala's mentor. Eala is not functioning only as the young partner who helps an older champion continue playing. Both are active competitors with their own reasons for wanting the partnership to succeed. That equality gives the story dignity. Venus brings history, recognition, and the trust of an American audience. Eala brings momentum, emotional connection, and the feeling that a new tennis market is arriving with her. When they stand together, those qualities do not cancel each other out. They create something Washington could not have achieved by promoting either player alone. That is why the tennis world is buzzing. It is not simply the surprise of seeing two generations together. It is the realization that this partnership solves several needs at once for the players, for their fans, and for a tournament searching for a story large enough to pull doubles into the center of attention. The buzz has already proven its value away from competition. What remains is whether the emotion surrounding the partnership can survive the moment the promotional clips stop and the match becomes real. That is the final test in Washington, but it should not be measured only by how many rounds Eala and Venus win. The result will matter, of course. They are entering a professional tournament, not a celebration or exhibition. Yet, the larger meaning of this partnership has already moved beyond the scoreboard. For Eala, Washington represents a new stage in how she is being seen. She is no longer arriving only as the young Filipino player with an inspiring story. The attention around the practice court shows that fans now expect her to occupy meaningful space at major events. They want to see her on the biggest courts, beside the biggest names, and inside the stories that shape the tournament. That change in expectation can be one of the most difficult parts of becoming a recognized athlete. The public begins asking for more before a player has had time to fully adjust to the attention already received. Washington gives Eala a chance to show that she can live inside that new visibility, not by pretending the moment is ordinary, and not by allowing Venus's presence to turn her into a supporting character, but by carrying herself as someone who belongs there. That may be one of the most valuable things she takes from the week. The experience of seeing Filipino flags around an American venue, hearing supporters call her name, and watching tournament media treat her appearance as a central story can change how a player understands her own reach. It confirms that her performances are building something larger than a collection of results. They are building an audience. For Venus, Washington carries a different meaning. At this stage of her career, every appearance will naturally be viewed through the lens of time. Fans will look for familiar gestures, familiar confidence, and reminders of the champion they have followed for decades. But the Eala partnership allows Venus to step outside that predictable frame. She is still being celebrated for what she represents, but she is also participating in the rise of someone new. That does not diminish her competitive purpose. It gives the moment another layer. Great champions are often discussed as if their only choices are to keep chasing the past or walk away from the sport. Venus is showing another possibility. A player can continue competing while becoming part of a changing tennis world, not as a museum piece, but as an active presence who still shapes where attention goes. That may be why her partnership with Eala feels more meaningful than a routine comeback story. The two women are not trying to occupy the same place. Eala does not threaten Venus's legacy, and Venus does not block Eala's future. Their stories strengthen each other because they move in different directions. One looks back across an extraordinary career. The other looks forward toward possibilities that remain unwritten. Washington allows those directions to meet for a moment. The tournament itself also has something important to prove. It has already benefited from the practice clips, online engagement, and emotional response surrounding the pair. But the real opportunity is larger than one viral video. Washington can show that women's doubles is capable of becoming a genuine attraction when fans are given a reason to care about the people on the court. Doubles is often treated as secondary because tournaments assume the audience will always prioritize singles. In many cases, that assumption becomes self-fulfilling. Smaller promotion leads to smaller crowds, which then appears to confirm that the event was never commercially valuable. Eala and Venus disrupt that cycle. They have created anticipation before the opening round, attracted fans to practice, and encouraged audiences in different countries to follow the same match. Even if this level of interest cannot be reproduced for every doubles team, it reveals that the format itself is not the problem. Storytelling, visibility, and emotional connection matter. When those elements come together, fans respond. A strong crowd for Eala and Venus would therefore represent more than support for two famous players. It would be evidence that women's doubles can occupy a larger place in a tournament when it is presented as something worth watching rather than something added around the edges. That possibility gives Washington a chance to turn a temporary burst of attention into a broader lesson. Fans may arrive because they love Venus. Others may come because Eala represents the Philippines on a major American stage. Some may simply want to witness the unusual sight of two careers separated by 25 years moving together through the same tournament. Whatever brings them there, the match can deepen that connection. And even if the partnership ends earlier than supporters hope, the week will not automatically become a failure. Its significance lies partly in what happened before the result was known. An early round doubles team became one of the most discussed attractions at a prominent American tournament. That is rare. It also explains why the buzz surrounding Eala and Venus feels more substantial than a manufactured publicity moment. The attention is rooted in real affection, real history, and a genuine belief that Eala's rise matters to the future of the sport. Venus makes that future easier for American audiences to recognize. Eala makes Venus's continued presence feel connected to something larger than memory. Together, they have created a bridge between generations, countries, and different ways of loving tennis. The tournament can place them on posters. Social media can spread every clip. A large crowd can make their first official appearance feel like a night session event even, before the schedule confirms where they will play. But the lasting image may already exist. It is the image of a 21-year-old Filipino star standing beside a 46-year-old American legend, not as a fan beside her hero, and not as the future waiting politely behind the past, but as two competitors sharing the same side of the court. That is why the tennis world is buzzing before Washington has even begun. And whatever the final score says, that image has already changed the way people see both of them.